Hello everyone, you all are welcome to our YouTube channel. In this video, we're gonna talk about how you can use SSH passwordless login using public key authentication. Before we see the demonstration, let's see the theoretical background behind in this public key authentication for SSH. Let's say you have a client and there is a remote server and you need to log in using SSH. For that, you have to provide your username and also the password. That is the typical SSH login for a remote server through your local client. But in the operations such as Ansible and the network automation operations, you can't always provide your username and password. That is not practicable. For that, you have to have an automatically authenticated process. So here is the place that public key authentication come onto the stage. Let's see how you can use this public key authentication. First, you have to generate a private key and a public key in your client machine, and then you have to share your public key to your remote server. First, you have to generate private key and public key, and then you have to share your public key to your remote server or whatever the remote machine you are going to connect it with using SSH. Okay, let's say you generated this public key and private key and shared with your remote server. Let's see how this public key authentication happen when you are going to connect using these keys. Let's say the client PC wants to connect with the remote server. Then the remote server will ask, do you have the private key that matching with my public key? Then the client will say, yes, I have. After that, there will be a mathematical operation in behind. You don't need to worry about that because that is a mathematical process that happened behind your screen. So after that mathematical operation, there will be a key matching between the public key and private key. After the matching, your client will be automatically authenticated to your remote server. That's what basically happen when you are going to use this public key authentication to connect to the remote servers using SSH. For the demonstration, I will use one client machine and a remote server. And let's assume that there is a person called Bob who have the login to the client and he need to connect to the remote server using public key authentication. Let's see how we can configure in our machines. Let's see the SSH passwordless login configuration in our client and server. So here I have two servers. One is our client and the other one is our server. So let's see the IP addresses configuration for each of these. If you check the IP configuration of client machine, so you can see that I've logged using the user Bob and the IP address is 10.1.1.20, and let's check the IP configuration of server. Yes, it's 10.1.1.20. Let's check whether we can log in using the password. Okay, I will SSH Bob at 10.1.1.10. that is my server. Yes, it's asking me to keep the fingerprint. Yes, and the password. Okay, so now I have successfully logging into the server using the user account Bob. So it makes sense that my password based login is working. So now we are going to configure the passwordless login for Bob from client to server. Okay, I'm still inside the server. You can see. Now I will log out from okay. There is a simple command you can use to configure public key and private key in the client machine. Okay, this is the major command, and as the argument you can pass RSA or DSA or whatever the encryption method you are going to use to generate your public key and private key. For this one I will use the RSA. Yes, in here it asked where to save. In here it asks where to save my key, so I will keep it as default. In here it asks where to save my key, so I will keep it as default. For the paraphrase, so I will keep it as empty for the moment, and also again empty, and you can see that our keys are generated in our client PC. You can see that our public key and private key are generated here, and they are saved in these locations. Okay, now the key generation is done. Now we need to share the private key for Bob to the server. You can use a simple command SSH copy ID, and you are going to share the key Bob at 10.1.1.10, which is the IP address of the server. Yes, now it's asking for the password of the user account of Bob at server. Yes. Okay, it's saying that now try logging into the machine with SSH Bob at 10.1.1.10 and check, make sure that only the keys you wanted were added. Okay, let's check it again. I'll clear all the stuff. Bob at 10.1.1.10. Yes, the login is successful. It's not asking for any of the passwords here. Okay, so that's about the generating public key and private key in my local client and sharing it with the remote server. So with using this we can log in to the remote server without prompting to username and password. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hope you would subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you.